I have to admit, I almost didn't go to the graduation party. My cousin was turning 22, finishing her nursing degree, and my aunt had rented out the back room of an Italian restaurant in town. The kind with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles that have been melting for probably 30 years. My mom called me 3 times that week reminding me to come. Each time, I said I would. Each time, I meant it a little less. It wasn't that I didn't love my cousin. I did. It was everything around her that made my chest tighten when I thought about walking into that room. My name is Lena. I'm 28 years old. And for most of my adult life, I believed a story about myself that wasn't true. The story went like this. I was the difficult one. The one who couldn't get it together. The one who dropped out of college junior year because she just couldn't handle the pressure. My older sister, Kira, had graduated with honors. My younger sister, Becca, was halfway through pharmacy school. And me? I'd spent the last 5 years working as a receptionist at a physical therapy clinic, sharing an apartment with a roommate named Olivia. Quietly trying not to think too hard about the 3 years I'd spent at state before everything fell apart. My parents never let me forget it. Not loudly, not with cruel words. Just with the particular silence that falls when someone changes the subject every time your name comes up in a conversation about success. I drove to the restaurant alone. I wore a green dress I'd bought on clearance and told myself it looked intentional. I found parking 2 blocks away because I was 20 minutes late and the lot was full. When I walked in, the party was already loud. My aunt had pushed together 4 long tables, and there had to be 30 people crammed around them. Cousins I hadn't seen since Christmas, neighbors who had watched us grow up, a few people from my grandparents' church. My grandmother was sitting at the head of the table nearest the window. She was 81, small, and wearing a purple cardigan I had seen her wear to every important occasion for the past 15 years. She caught my eye the moment I walked in. She smiled. Not the polite smile she gave to people she was being gracious toward. The real one, the one that made her whole face move. I found a seat near the end of the table. Between my uncle on one side and a folding chair nobody had claimed on the other. I poured myself a glass of water. I smiled at my cousin and told her she looked beautiful, which she did. I told myself I would eat something, say my hellos, and be home by 9. I almost made it. Dinner came and went. My aunt gave a toast. My cousin cried a little, the happy kind. Someone made a joke about the bread being better than the pasta and the waiter pretended not to hear. I was on my 2nd glass of wine and starting to feel almost normal when my mother leaned across the table and said, in that particular voice she uses when she wants everyone around her to hear but pretend she's only talking to one person. Lena, your grandmother was just saying how proud she is of Kira's promotion. Did you hear? Regional manager before 35. Can you imagine? I said that was great. I meant it mostly. You know, my mother continued, it's never too late to go back to school. Kira said her company does tuition reimbursement. Maybe something like that, Margaret. My grandmother's voice was quiet, but it landed like something heavy set down on a glass table. My mother stopped. My grandmother set down her fork. She folded her hands in front of her plate, the way she does when she has decided something and is not going to be moved. I want to say something, she said. Not loudly. She never had to speak loudly, and I want everyone at this table to hear it. The conversation around us didn't stop immediately, but it slowed. The way sound does when it senses something is coming. For 4 years, my grandmother said, looking at my mother and then at my father across from her, I wrote a check every single month. $800. I gave it to you both because you told me Lena's financial aid had a gap. You said the school required it. You said she didn't know because you didn't want her to feel like a burden. She paused. Those were your words. You didn't want her to feel like a burden. I don't remember putting my wine glass down. I must have. I did it because I love my granddaughter, my grandmother said, and because I trusted you. The table was very quiet now. My aunt had stopped mid-sentence. My uncle's fork was hovering somewhere above his plate. My father said, Mom, this isn't the time. I spoke to someone at the university last spring, she said as if he hadn't said anything. When Lena mentioned she'd been looking into finishing her degree and asked if I might be able to help, I called the financial aid office. I asked about her account. They told me there was no outstanding gap that had been covered by a third party. They told me her account had gone delinquent in her third year. Unpaid tuition. That's why she was asked to leave. I heard my cousin make a sound beside me. Small. Like she'd swallowed something wrong. $38,400, my grandmother said. That is what I sent over 4 years. I have every bank statement. I kept them because I am 81 years old, and I have learned that you keep everything. My mother's face had done something I had never seen it do before. It had gone completely, utterly still. I'm not telling this story to embarrass anyone, my grandmother said, and I believed her. That's the thing about my grandmother. She has never needed drama. She's never needed to perform. She was telling this story because it was the truth, and she had decided the truth had waited long enough. I'm telling it because my granddaughter has spent 5 years believing she failed. She hasn't said it. But I know her, and I am not willing to sit at another table and watch her be made to feel small by the people who are responsible. I could not speak. I am a person who always has something to say. My roommate jokes that I narrate my own life in real time, and I had nothing. Not one word. My father said her name. Low. Warning. She looked at him, and whatever was in her face made him look away first. I've already spoken to an attorney, she said. That conversation has happened. What happens next is up to your parents, Lena. She turned to me then, fully, the way she used to when I was small, and she wanted to make sure I was really listening. But I want you to know that what happened to you was not your fault. You didn't fail. You were failed. I grew up in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a backyard with a shed my father always said he was going to clean out and never did. We were comfortable. Not wealthy, but comfortable. My father worked in logistics management. My mother taught middle school art for 20 years before she moved into district administration. We had health insurance and annual vacations and a refrigerator that always had food in it. I was the middle child. Kira is 4 years older than me. Becca is 3 years younger. We were the kind of family that looked from the outside like things were fine, and they were fine. That's what makes it hard to explain. Nothing was ever dramatic or violent or obviously wrong. It was more like being in a room where the heat is turned up so slowly you don't realize you're suffocating until you're already dizzy. Kira was the golden one. She had always been. She was organized and driven and got a partial scholarship to Ohio State, which she parlayed into a business degree and then a management training program, and then apparently a regional manager title before 35. My mother talks about Kira the way some people talk about their favorite weather. Becca was the baby, which meant she was protected, loved differently, given a longer leash and fewer expectations all at once, in the way youngest children sometimes are. I was the one in the middle who liked to read too many books and ask too many questions and feel things too intensely, which is a combination that does not always play well in a house that values keeping things smooth. I got into state my senior year of high school. I was excited in a way I remember vividly, the specific lightness of believing your real life is about to begin. I was going to study communications, maybe go into journalism. I wanted to write. I wanted to tell stories about real people. My parents sat me down a few weeks before I left and explained the finances. My father did most of the talking. Financial aid had covered a good portion, he said. There was a small monthly gap that they were going to handle. I shouldn't worry about it. I should just focus on school. I did what they said. I focused on school. I worked part-time at the campus coffee shop my first 2 years, set most of what I made back toward what I assumed were shared household expenses, felt vaguely guilty about the cost of textbooks. I didn't ask too many questions because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. Junior year, everything started feeling off. I got a letter from the bursar's office in October. I went to the financial aid office. They were polite but unhelpful in the way that institutions are when they are following policy. My account had an outstanding balance. It had been growing. There were payment plans available, they said, but the current status meant I was on academic hold. I called my mother. She said she would handle it. I called my father. He said it must be an administrative error. He would look into it. A week passed. 2 weeks. I got another letter. I drove home on a Friday in November and sat at the kitchen table and told them I needed to understand what was happening. My mother said they had hit a hard patch financially and were trying to sort it out. My father said I should go back to school and not worry. My mother cried, which is something she does with precision at the exact moments when crying ends a conversation most efficiently. I went back. I waited. The hold became a suspension. I lost my on-campus housing. I came home. My parents told everyone I had decided to take a break, that the pressure had gotten to me, that I was figuring things out. And I, because I was 20 and ashamed and had no counter-narrative, let them tell it. I spent the next year in my old bedroom, trying to understand what had happened to me. I got the receptionist job. I started to build something small and quiet. I moved in with Olivia when I was 23. I told myself the story my parents told, that I had cracked under pressure, that college wasn't for everyone, that maybe I'd go back someday when things were more stable. The thought of going back had started circling again the previous year. I was 27, and something in me had gotten tired of waiting to feel ready. I looked into completion programs. I asked my grandmother quietly, carefully, if she thought it was a foolish idea. She had asked me what I needed. I told her I wasn't sure about the money. She had gone quiet on the phone in a way I didn't know how to read. She told me to let her make some calls. I assumed she meant she might help. I didn't know what she was actually doing. After my grandmother finished speaking, the table stayed quiet for what felt like a long time. Then my aunt said, "Oh my God," softly, and the silence broke into several smaller, louder pieces. My father stood up. He said something about this not being the place and not being the whole story. My mother touched his arm. Her face was controlled again, the way she controls it, but her hands weren't quite right. My grandmother looked at me. "Are you okay?" she said. I almost laughed. It was such a simple question for such a completely disorienting moment. I said I didn't know. She nodded, like that was the right answer. My uncle, who is my father's brother and who has never in my memory spoken an unnecessary word, said, "You should have just told the kid, Rob. That's all. You should have just told her." My father said nothing to that. I looked at my mother. I wanted to see something there, not an apology. I was past hoping for that in that moment. Just acknowledgement. The smallest recognition that what they had let me believe for 5 years was not true. She looked down at her plate. I excused myself from the table. I went to the restaurant bathroom and stood over the sink and ran cold water over my wrists the way I do when my brain gets too full. I looked at myself in the mirror above the paper towel dispenser. I looked like someone who had just been handed a map to a place she had already left. My cousin found me there. She knocked on the door, and I let her in, and she hugged me without saying anything for a full minute, which is exactly what I needed. "I didn't know," she said. "I know," I said. "Your grandma," she said, and shook her head. "Your grandma." The week after the party, I called my grandmother every day. Not to talk about what had happened, at first, just to hear her voice. She has a way of being present on the phone that most people don't manage even in person. On the fourth call, we talked about it. She told me she had contacted a family law attorney in March, months before the party. She had gone alone, driven herself downtown, sat in an office, and laid out every bank statement. The attorney had confirmed what she already suspected. The money she had sent, in the full amount, had gone into my parents' joint account and had never been directed toward my tuition. "What are they going to do?" I asked. "That depends on what you want," she said. "The attorney says there's a path forward if you choose it. But this is your situation, Lena. I made it public because I felt I had to. The next part is yours." I thought about that for a long time. I want to be honest about the part that doesn't fit neatly into a story about justice, because when I thought about taking legal action against my parents, what I felt wasn't satisfaction or power. What I felt was grief. Real grief. The kind that sits in your chest like wet concrete. Not for the money. For the version of my parents I had wanted them to be. For the years I had spent apologizing, internally, for a failure that was not mine. I talked to the attorney my grandmother had connected me with. I learned that what had happened might constitute fraud, depending on how it was pursued. I learned that there were options. I took a week and then another, and I made a decision. I sent my parents a letter, written, not emailed, because I wanted it to be something they had to hold. I said I was not going to pursue litigation at this time. I said that wasn't forgiveness. I said that what they had taken from me was not only money, it was years I could not get back, and a story about myself that had shaped every quiet decision I had made since I was 20. I said I needed them to understand that, not for their sake, but for mine. Because I needed to say it out loud, even in writing, before I could put it down. I said I was going back to school. I said my grandmother was helping me with that directly, in a way that involved no one else. I said I would be in touch when I was ready, and I would understand if they didn't know what to say. My mother called 4 times over the next 2 weeks. I let it go to voicemail. My father texted once, "We love you and we want to talk when you're ready." I read it 12 times and didn't respond. My grandmother enrolled me in a meeting with the admissions office of the regional university 20 minutes from my apartment. It turns out that with my previous credits, I needed 18 more hours to complete my degree. 18 hours. 2 semesters, maybe 3 if I stayed part-time while keeping my job. I sat in that meeting and listened to a woman explain my options, and I did not cry in her office, but I cried in my car in the parking lot for approximately 7 minutes. Then I called Olivia and told her everything that had happened. She said, "I'm taking you to dinner." I said it was 2 in the afternoon. She said, "I'm taking you to an early dinner." And she did. I started classes in January, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, Saturday mornings. I am the oldest person in 2 of my 3 classes, and the second oldest in the third. I like it more than I thought I would. I like being older and knowing why I want to be there. I like that I don't take the reading for granted anymore. My grandmother calls every Sunday. We talk for an hour, sometimes more. She asks about my classes. She tells me about her garden. Occasionally, she tells me something dry and devastating about her bridge club, and I have to put her on speaker so I can laugh with both hands free. My parents and I have spoken twice since the party. Short conversations, careful, like people navigating the same narrow hallway from opposite ends. It is not repaired. I don't know if it will be. I'm trying to hold on to the true thing, which is that they are complicated people who did something that caused me real harm, and those 2 facts don't cancel each other out. I don't have to choose between them. Kira texted me about a month after everything came out. She said she hadn't known. She said she was sorry. I believed her. We had coffee last month, the first time in 2 years, and we talked for 3 hours about things that had nothing to do with any of this. It was awkward in places and easier in others, and when we hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel, which was that she is my sister and that matters, and I can want her in my life even while I'm still figuring everything else out. Becca and I haven't spoken. I don't know where we are. I'm leaving that door cracked and not forcing it. There's a thing that happens when you've believed a story about yourself for a long time. You build your whole interior around it. You make decisions based on it. You turn down opportunities because the story says you're not capable. You stay small because the story says that's the appropriate size for someone like you. I spent 5 years being the size of a story that wasn't true. I am not going to tell you I'm completely fine now because I don't believe in that version of endings. I still have mornings where I sit on the edge of my bed for too long. I still catch myself apologizing for things that don't require apologies. I'm 28 years old, and I am learning, slowly, how to take up the space I was always allowed to have. But I am in school. I am finishing something I started. I have my grandmother, who drove herself to an attorney's office at 81 because she decided that the truth had waited long enough. I have that. And I have myself, which turns out to be more than I thought, now that I know what I'm actually working with. I've thought a lot about why it took so long for the truth to come out. Not in a bitter way, not anymore. Just honestly. And the answer I keep landing on is that lies of this kind don't survive indefinitely. They can't. Every choice has a weight to it, and weight accumulates. My parents made a decision when I was 20 years old, and then they made it again every month for 4 years. And then they made it every time they watched me shrink into the story they had written for me. That's not one mistake. That's a sustained, repeated choice. And sustained choices, in either direction, always produce their results eventually. My grandmother kept every bank statement. 81 years old, and she kept every single one in a folder because she had lived long enough to know that you keep the evidence of what you've given, and you keep it precisely because you hope you'll never need it. The fact that she needed it. The fact that she had to drive herself to an attorney's office alone, without telling anyone, that says everything about what integrity actually looks like when it's tested. She didn't perform her values. She just lived them, quietly, and when the moment came, she was ready. I think about the version of me that believed the story, 20 years old, sitting in the financial aid office, calling my mother from a campus payphone because I didn't want to use my minutes, listening to her cry and deciding again to wait. That version of me was not stupid. I want to say that clearly because I spent years believing I was. She was trusting. She had been raised to trust the people who were supposed to protect her, and she extended that trust past the point where it was deserved. That's not a flaw. That's what happens when the people closest to you spend years teaching you that their word is safe. What I understand now, and what I wish I had understood at 20, is that intelligence without information is just guessing. I didn't have the information. I couldn't have known. And the moment I had it, the moment my grandmother stood up at that table and spoke, I made a different choice. I wrote the letter. I found the attorney. I walked into the admissions office. That's not a small thing. That's actually the whole thing. The courage part is quieter than people make it sound. It didn't feel like strength when I was sitting in my car crying in a university parking lot. It felt like showing up anyway. It felt like signing the enrollment form with hands that weren't entirely steady. It felt like calling my grandmother on Sunday and letting her tell me about her garden even when my brain was still sorting through rubble. Kira texted me and said she was sorry. Becca and I aren't there yet. My parents and I are somewhere in the middle of a long, unfinished sentence. None of that is resolved in the clean way that stories are supposed to resolve. But I am in class on Saturday mornings. I am reading things I care about and writing papers that ask me to think. I am 18 credit hours away from finishing something I started a decade ago. Not because everything worked out, but because the truth finally had somewhere to land. And I was still standing there when it did.